I used to think the most dangerous woman in my marriage was some stranger. I was wrong. She was standing beside me on my wedding day, holding my veil, smiling in every photo, and calling herself my best friend. When I gave birth, she came to my house with food, gifts, and tears in her eyes. She held my baby like she loved him. She hugged me like she wanted to protect me. But while I was recovering, exhausted and barely sleeping, she was sleeping with my husband in the same house where I was raising his child. And when I finally found out, they didn't just try to destroy my marriage. They tried to prove I was an unstable mother, take my baby from me, hide our money, and replace me completely. So I let them believe they had won. I let them plan their perfect little engagement party. And then I walked in with the one thing they never expected me to have: proof. Back then, Claire was not a threat. She was family. She wasn't just my maid of honor. She was my best friend, the closest thing I had to a sister, the woman who knew every secret I had ever trusted anyone with. That morning, she fixed my hair, touched up my lipstick, wiped my tears before they ruined my makeup, and whispered, "You finally got your happy ending." I believed her. I believed she was happy for me. When I walked down the aisle, Daniel cried before I even reached him, and I thought I was stepping into the life I had always prayed for: a husband, a home, a family, a future. And just behind me, in every photo, Claire was there. Close enough to be trusted. Close enough to become part of the memory forever. At the reception, she gave a speech that made everyone laugh, but one line stayed buried in my mind for years. She looked at Daniel, not at me, and said, "Some people are lucky enough to marry the man everyone else wished they had." Everyone laughed. I laughed too. I thought it was a joke. I didn't notice how long she looked at him. I didn't question why she kept fixing his tie, touching his sleeve, standing too close in every photo. I told myself she was just being helpful because that was easier than imagining my best friend could want my husband. Later that night, she helped me fold my veil back into its box and said, "Keep this. One day you'll show it to your daughter." I thought she was blessing my marriage. I didn't know she was studying it. I didn't know the woman holding my veil was already imagining what my life would look like if it belonged to her. There were signs that day, but I laughed them away because trusting Claire was easier than questioning her. Before the ceremony, I found her alone with Daniel in the hallway, fixing the flower on his suit. Her fingers rested against his chest a little too long, and when she saw me, she smiled and said, "Relax, I'm just making sure your groom looks perfect." Your groom. I should have heard the way she said it, like she was reminding herself he wasn't hers. During the photos, she kept finding reasons to stand beside him, brushing something from his sleeve, adjusting his collar, joking that if I ever got tired of him, plenty of women would take him. Everyone laughed, so I laughed too. Later, during our first dance, my aunt leaned close and whispered, "Your friend watches your husband like he's the groom at her wedding." I rolled my eyes and told her Claire was just emotional. By the end of the night, Claire hugged Daniel before she hugged me, holding on just a second too long. Then she touched my veil one last time and said, "Take care of him." At the time, I thought it was love. Now I know it was resentment. She wasn't happy I had married Daniel. She was angry I had married him first. Everything changed after our son was born. Not all at once. Not in a way I could explain to anyone without sounding ungrateful, but slowly, quietly, like the walls of my own home had started moving closer while I was too tired to notice. His name was Noah, and the first time the nurse placed him on my chest, I cried so hard I could barely breathe. Daniel cried too. He kissed my forehead, held my hand, and told me I was the strongest woman he had ever known. For a few hours, I believed we had become exactly what I had dreamed of on our wedding day: a family. But then we came home, and the dream became bottles, diapers, bleeding, stitches, laundry, midnight feedings, and a kind of exhaustion I didn't know existed. I loved my baby more than anything in the world, but love did not make my body heal faster. Love did not give me sleep. Love did not stop me from crying in the shower because I didn't recognize myself anymore. Daniel helped at first, but only in the way people help when they still expect to be thanked for every small thing. If he changed one diaper, he acted like he had carried the whole house on his back. If Noah cried while Daniel was watching television, he would sigh and say, "Can you take him? He wants you." Soon, the man who once cried at the altar when he saw me walking toward him started looking at me like I was a problem he had not agreed to solve. That was when Claire began coming over more often. At first, I was grateful. She brought soup, folded baby clothes, washed bottles, and told me to rest. She would take Noah from my arms and say, "Go shower. I've got him." And I wanted so badly to believe that was love. I wanted to believe my best friend had shown up when my husband was pulling away. But the more tired I became, the more comfortable she became inside my house. She knew which drawer held Noah's pacifiers. She knew where Daniel kept his coffee. She knew what time he came home from work, what meals he liked, what shirts he wore on Fridays, and which side of the couch he preferred. Sometimes I would wake from a short nap and hear the two of them laughing in the kitchen, their voices low and easy, like I was the guest in their life instead of the wife in my own marriage. When I walked in, Claire would smile too quickly and say, "Look who finally got some sleep." Daniel would barely look up from his phone. I told myself I was being sensitive. I told myself new mothers imagine things because they are tired. But then Claire started saying things that made my stomach tighten. She would hold Noah against her chest and whisper, "Our little angel," as if the word "our" belonged to her. She would tell Daniel, "You need to eat properly. You look exhausted," while I stood there with milk stains on my shirt and 2 hours of sleep in my body. She would laugh and say, "I swear, I'm basically living here now," and Daniel would smile like he liked the idea. I should have said something sooner. I should have drawn a line. But when you are weak, exhausted, and scared of being called dramatic, you let people step over small boundaries until one day you realize they are standing exactly where you used to be. Claire did not move into my life all at once. She did it in pieces, so small that if I complained, I would sound ungrateful. First, she started keeping a spare cardigan at our house because she said she was always cold when she came over. Then she left a pair of slippers by the back door. Then a toothbrush appeared in the guest bathroom. Each time she had a reason. Each time, Daniel told me I was being ridiculous if I noticed. "She's helping us," he said. "Why do you have to make everything uncomfortable?" So I swallowed my discomfort and told myself I was lucky to have help. But soon, Claire wasn't acting like a guest anymore. She walked into the kitchen without asking, opened our cabinets, made Daniel's coffee exactly the way he liked it, and reminded him about meetings I didn't even know he had. She started answering questions before I could. If Daniel asked where Noah's clean onesies were, Claire answered. If Daniel asked what we had for dinner, Claire answered. If Noah cried, Claire reached for him before I did. And every time she did, she smiled at me like she was saving me from myself. At first, Daniel praised her in small ways. "Claire is amazing with him. Claire really knows how to calm him down. Claire cooked again? That was nice of her." Then the praise became comparison. "Why can't you relax like Claire? She never makes everything feel so heavy. She understands how hard this is for me too." For him, that was the part that hurt most. I was the one bleeding, nursing, barely sleeping, trying to keep a newborn alive while my body felt broken. But somehow Claire had made Daniel believe he was the one who needed comforting. She would sit beside him after dinner while I washed bottles at the sink, asking about his day in that soft voice she used when she wanted to sound harmless. Sometimes she would touch his arm when she laughed. Sometimes she would lean too close to show him something on her phone. And when I looked at them for too long, Daniel would snap. "What?" Like I was the one doing something wrong. The worst moments were with Noah. Claire began calling herself his bonus mommy as a joke. The first time she said it, my body went cold. She was bouncing him gently in the nursery, while Daniel stood in the doorway smiling. "Come to your bonus mommy," she whispered, kissing his forehead. I forced a laugh because both of them were looking at me, waiting to see if I would react. Daniel said, "She's joking. Don't start." So I didn't start. I just stood there while another woman held my son and tested how much of my motherhood she could take before I fought back. Then one afternoon, I came downstairs after pumping milk and found Claire sitting at the dining table with Daniel, going through a folder of bills. My bills. My household. My marriage. She looked up calmly and said, "I'm just helping him organize things. You have enough on your plate." Daniel didn't correct her. He didn't say, "This is between me and my wife." He just kept flipping through the papers as if Claire belonged there more than I did. That was the day I first felt it clearly. She wasn't visiting to help me recover. She was auditioning for my life. And Daniel was already giving her the part. Daniel did not leave me suddenly. He made me feel small first. That was how it began. He stopped asking if I was okay and started asking why I was always crying. He stopped noticing when I had not eaten and started noticing when the house was messy. If Noah cried in the middle of the night, Daniel would roll over with a groan and say, "Can you please handle him before I lose my mind?" As if I was sleeping peacefully beside him instead of already sitting up with my body aching and my eyes burning. During the day, he moved through the house like a man disappointed by what his life had become. He looked at the bottles in the sink, the laundry on the couch, the baby blanket over my shoulder, and his face would tighten. "This place used to feel like a home," he said once. I was holding Noah when he said it. I looked down at our son and wondered what Daniel thought a home was supposed to look like after a baby arrived. Quiet? Clean? Pretty? Easy? Claire, of course, always arrived at the perfect time. She never came when I looked rested. She came when I was wearing the same shirt from yesterday, when Noah was screaming, when the kitchen smelled like old coffee and baby formula. She would sweep in with groceries, perfume, styled hair, and that soft, patient smile that made me look worse just by standing next to her. Daniel noticed. I saw it in the way his shoulders relaxed when she walked in. I heard it in the warmth of his voice when he said, "Claire, thank God you're here." Thank God. As if I was the storm and she was the rescue. Then the comparisons started slipping into our conversations like poison. Claire said you should try sleeping when the baby sleeps. Claire thinks you might need to talk to someone. Claire doesn't understand why you keep pushing everyone away. Every sentence began with her name, and every sentence ended with me being the problem. When I told him I didn't like how involved she had become, he laughed without humor and said, "She's the only person keeping this house together." I said, "I thought that was supposed to be us." He looked at me for a long moment, then said, "There hasn't been an us since Noah was born." That sentence broke something in me. Not because it was true, but because I realized he had been waiting for a reason to blame me. Claire gave him that reason. She gave him a softer place to land, a woman who listened without asking for help, smiled without crying, and made motherhood look easy because she only played it for a few hours at a time. One evening, after I had spent the whole day caring for Noah with a fever, Daniel came home and found me sitting on the nursery floor, exhausted, with medicine cups and tissues scattered around me. Instead of asking about our son, he stared at the mess and said, "You can't keep falling apart like this." I whispered, "I'm not falling apart. I'm tired." He shook his head and said, "Claire was right. You're not yourself anymore." That was when I understood what she had been doing. She was not just comforting him. She was teaching him how to see me, not as his wife, not as the mother of his child, but as a weak, unstable woman standing between him and the life she wanted. And the worst part was, Daniel was starting to believe her because believing her meant he did not have to feel guilty for what he was becoming. The night I found out, I was not looking for betrayal. I was looking for a clean bottle. Noah had woken up just after 2 a.m, hungry and fussy, his tiny fists pressed against his cheeks while he cried against my chest. I remember walking down the hallway barefoot, still half asleep, with my robe barely tied and my hair falling into my face. The house was dark except for a thin strip of light coming from the living room. At first, I thought Daniel had fallen asleep watching television again. Then I heard Claire's voice. Soft. Low. Too comfortable for that hour of the night. I stopped before I reached the stairs. Noah whimpered in my arms, and I gently pressed his blanket closer, trying to keep him quiet without knowing why. Then I heard Daniel say, "Not here." She could wake up. My whole body went cold. There are sentences your heart understands before your mind is willing to. I stood in the hallway, hidden in the dark, holding my baby against my chest while the two people I trusted most whispered below me like thieves. Claire laughed softly and said, "She's always exhausted. She won't hear anything." Then there was silence. Not empty silence. The kind of silence that has movement inside it. The kind of silence that makes your stomach twist because you know exactly what is happening even before you see it. I wanted to walk away. I wanted to go back upstairs, feed my son, and pretend my life was still intact for one more night. But then Claire spoke again, and every word landed like a knife. "I've waited long enough, Daniel. When are you going to leave her?" I gripped Noah so tightly, he stirred against me. Daniel did not sound shocked. He did not say, "Claire, stop." He did not say, "That's my wife." He sighed, like this was a conversation they had already had too many times. "It's complicated," he said, "because of the baby." The baby. Not our son. Not Noah. The baby. Claire's voice changed then, sharper underneath the sweetness. "You keep using him as an excuse. I'm the one here, every day. I'm the one helping you. I'm the one who actually understands you." Daniel whispered something I couldn't hear, and then Claire said, "She doesn't even notice what's happening around her anymore. She can barely take care of herself." I felt the wall behind me because my knees almost gave out. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run downstairs and slap the truth out of both of them. But Noah was in my arms, warm and innocent, and suddenly I understood something terrifying. If I reacted the way they expected me to, they would use it against me. They would say I was unstable. They would say I was hysterical. They would say Claire was right. So I stayed still. I stood there in the dark, swallowing every sound that tried to escape my throat, and listened as my best friend and my husband discussed my life like I was already gone. Claire said, "You need to start thinking about custody before she gets worse." Daniel said nothing for a long time. Then he said, "I know." Those two words hurt more than the affair, because in that moment I realized they were not just betraying me. They were planning. I went back upstairs without the bottle. I fed Noah with shaking hands and cried silently so he wouldn't wake fully. By morning, Daniel came into the nursery and kissed Noah's forehead like nothing had happened. Claire texted me at 9 o'clock asking if I wanted her to bring breakfast. I stared at her message until the screen blurred. Then I typed back, "That would be great. Thank you." Because that night, something inside me changed. I was still broken. I was still terrified. But I was no longer blind. After that night, I stopped asking myself whether something was wrong. I knew something was wrong. The harder part was pretending I didn't. Claire came over that morning with breakfast, wearing a soft blue sweater and the same innocent smile she had worn in my wedding photos. She kissed Noah's forehead, placed coffee on the counter for Daniel, and asked me if I had slept at all. I looked at her hands touching my son, at Daniel standing beside her like they were already a team, and every part of me wanted to scream. But I didn't. I smiled. I thanked her. I watched. For the first time, I understood that if I confronted them without proof, they would not break apart. They would turn on me together. And that was exactly what happened 3 days later, when I finally made one mistake. I found Claire's bracelet under the cushion on Daniel's side of the bed. Not in the living room. Not in the kitchen. In our bedroom. I held it in my palm, walked downstairs, and asked her calmly why it was there. Claire's face changed for half a second. Just half a second. Then she looked wounded. Daniel stood up, so fast his chair scraped the floor. "Are you serious right now?" he said. I told him I wanted an answer. Claire's eyes filled with tears before mine did, and that was when I knew she had been waiting for this moment. "I came upstairs yesterday to get Noah's blanket," she whispered. "I must have dropped it. I can't believe you would think that about me." Daniel looked at me like I had slapped her. "She has done nothing but help you," he said. "And this is how you treat her?" I tried to tell him what I heard that night. I tried to repeat Claire's words, the custody conversation, the way he said, "I know." But the more I talked, the worse I sounded. My voice shook. My hands trembled. Noah started crying in the next room, and Claire immediately moved toward him like she was the calm one, like she was the mother. Daniel stepped between us and said, Don't go near him when you're like this. When you're like this. Those words became the beginning of their weapon. By dinner, Daniel had called his mother. By the next day, his sister knew. By the end of the week, everyone was speaking to me gently, carefully, like I might explode if they used the wrong tone. Claire cried to them and said she was worried about me. She said I wasn't sleeping, that I was paranoid, that I kept accusing her of things because I was overwhelmed after giving birth. She never said I was a bad mother directly.
She was smarter than that.
She said she was concerned for Noah's safety. That sounded kinder. That sounded believable. Daniel started repeating her words as if they were facts. You need help. You're not thinking clearly. You're scaring people. Every time I defended myself, he used my anger as proof. Every time I cried, he used my tears as proof. Every time I asked Claire to leave my house, she lowered her eyes and made herself look small, and Daniel acted like I had attacked her. I began to understand how easily a woman can be erased in her own home. Not by one big lie, but by 100 small ones told in soft voices. Claire didn't need to steal my place all at once. She only had to convince everyone that I was too broken to deserve it. And the cruelest part was that she used my pain, the pain she helped create, as evidence against me. The first time I realized they were building a case against me, I found Daniel standing in the nursery doorway with his phone in his hand. Noah had been crying for almost an hour that afternoon, one of those deep, helpless newborn cries that made my whole body shake with guilt because nothing I did seemed to come for him. I had tried feeding him, changing him, rocking him, walking with him pressed against my chest until my arms ached. By the time Daniel came home, I was sitting on the floor beside the crib, crying silently while Noah screamed above me. I looked up, expecting help. Instead, Daniel was recording me. What are you doing? I asked. He lowered the phone too quickly and said, Nothing. I'm just worried. Worried. That became the word they used when they wanted to hurt me while pretending they cared. Claire started saying it too. She would arrive with that calm little smile, take one look at my tired face and say, I'm worried about you. She said it when I forgot to eat. She said it when I cried. She said it when I asked her not to kiss Noah on the mouth. She said it when I told her I needed space from her. And every time she said it, Daniel looked at me like another piece of evidence had been added to a file I could not see. Then the cameras started appearing at the worst possible moments. Daniel filmed me when I was half asleep on the couch with burp cloths around me. Claire filmed me when I snapped. Please stop touching my baby like he's yours. Daniel saved screenshots of texts where I begged him to come home early because I couldn't do another night alone. Claire took photos of dishes in the sink, laundry piles, an empty formula can on the counter, Noah crying in his bassinet while I was in the bathroom for 2 minutes. They collected the ugliest seconds of my hardest days and stitched them together into a version of me that looked careless, unstable, and dangerous. One evening, I overheard Claire telling Daniel in the kitchen, if this ever goes to court, you need documentation.
Court.
The word hit me harder than the affair. Until then, part of me had still believed this was about Daniel wanting another woman. But it was bigger than that. They were preparing to take Noah, my baby, the child I had carried, delivered, fed, rocked, and loved through pain they never saw because they were too busy turning that pain into ammunition. A few days later, Daniel placed a folder on the dining table and told me he had spoken to an attorney. He said he wanted a separation for Noah's safety. Claire was sitting beside him, hands folded, eyes lowered like she was at a funeral instead of the scene of her own victory. Daniel said he would be asking for temporary custody until I was emotionally stable. I stared at him, then at her, and something inside me went completely quiet. Not calm, not peaceful, quiet in the way the sky goes still before a storm. Claire finally looked up and said, This doesn't mean you're a bad mother. It just means Noah needs what's best for him right now. That was the moment I stopped seeing her as my best friend. I stopped seeing Daniel as the man I married. I saw them clearly for what they were. Two people who had broken me, recorded the pieces, and planned to use them to steal the only person I had left. And for the first time, beneath the fear, beneath the exhaustion, beneath the heartbreak, I felt something sharper begin to rise. They wanted proof.
Fine.
I would get proof too. Daniel told me to leave on a Thursday morning, while Noah was asleep upstairs and Claire was making coffee in my kitchen. That was the detail I remember most. Not the words, not even the look on his face. The smell of coffee, the sound of the spoon tapping against the mug, the sight of Claire standing by the counter in my robe because she had spilled something on her blouse, smiling softly like she belonged there. Daniel stood in front of me with his arms crossed and said, "I think it would be best if you stayed somewhere else for a while." I laughed at first because the sentence made no sense. Somewhere else? This was my home. My baby was upstairs. My clothes were in the closet. My wedding photos were on the wall. My name was on half the bills stacked by the door. But Daniel didn't blink. He said his mother agreed. He said his attorney thought distance would be healthy. He said everyone was worried about my emotional state. Claire lowered her eyes and whispered, "We just want what's best for Noah."
We.
That one word nearly made me lose control. I looked at her standing beside my husband in my kitchen, wearing my robe, talking about my son like she had a vote. I told Daniel I wasn't leaving without Noah. His expression hardened. "Then don't make this ugly," he said. "Because if you do, I will call my attorney right now and tell him you're refusing to cooperate." Claire reached out like she wanted to touch my arm, and I stepped back so fast she froze. For a second, the mask slipped. I saw it in her eyes. Satisfaction.
She had wanted this.
She had imagined this moment. Me cornered. Me humiliated. Me forced out of the house while she stayed behind. Daniel gave me 1 hour to pack. 1 hour to reduce my life to a few bags while the woman who stole it sat downstairs pretending to be heartbroken. I went upstairs with shaking legs and stood in the nursery, staring at Noah's tiny face. He was sleeping with one hand curled beside his cheek, completely unaware that the adults around him were tearing his world apart. I packed his diapers, formula, pajamas, blankets, medicine, and the blue stuffed elephant Daniel bought him before he was born, back when I still believed he loved us. Then I packed my things badly. A few shirts, leggings, a toothbrush, my phone charger. I forgot half of what I needed because my hands would not stop trembling. When I came back downstairs with Noah in his carrier, Claire was waiting by the front door. She had tears in her eyes, perfect tears, the kind that never ruined her makeup. "I hope you get better," she said. I looked at Daniel, waiting for him to say something human. Anything.
I'm sorry.
Be safe. I love my son, but he only looked at the baby carrier and said, "I expect updates every day. Not goodbye. Not please take care. Just control." I walked out with Noah on one arm and 2 bags cutting into my shoulder, while Claire stood inside my house behind my husband like a bride waiting for the door to close. I had nowhere beautiful to go. I drove to a cheap extended stay motel near the highway because it was the only place I could afford that night. The room smelled like bleach and old carpet. The heater made a clicking sound every few minutes. I put Noah's blanket on the bed, sat beside him, and finally let myself break. I cried so hard I had to press my fist against my mouth so I wouldn't scare him. I had lost my husband. I had lost my home. My name had been dragged through my own family like a sickness. And somewhere across town, Claire was probably opening cabinets in my kitchen, touching my things, stepping deeper into the life she had stolen piece by piece. But after the tears stopped, I looked at Noah sleeping under that thin motel light, and something inside me settled. They thought throwing me out would finish me. They thought humiliation would make me desperate, loud, careless. They thought I would beg to come back. Instead, I picked up my phone, opened a new folder, and named it evidence. Then I saved the first screenshot. Daniel's message from that morning. "Leave quietly, or I'll make sure you never get full custody." That was the first real mistake he made. For the next few days, I gave Daniel exactly what he expected from me. Short replies. Tired voice.
No arguments. No threats. No begging.
When he texted asking where Noah was, I sent a photo. When he demanded updates, I gave them. When he told me Claire was worried about me, I replied, "I understand." Every word tasted like glass, but I swallowed it because I was starting to understand something they had not considered. They knew how to fight a desperate woman. They knew how to provoke a tired mother until she cried, yelled, or sounded unstable. But they did not know what to do with a quiet one. So, I became quiet. I let Daniel believe the motel had broken me. I let Claire believe she had finally stepped into my place. I let his family believe I was too ashamed to defend myself. Meanwhile, I watched everything. I saved every message Daniel sent. I wrote down every threat, every insult, every time he used Noah like a weapon. When Claire texted me pretending to be kind, I saved those too, because her kindness always had poison underneath it. Maybe it's better if Noah has a calmer environment right now. Screenshot. Daniel is only trying to protect his son. Screenshot. You should focus on getting help before you worry about custody. Screenshot. They thought they were talking to a woman who had lost everything. They did not realize they were handing me the map of how they planned to take the rest. On the fourth night in that motel, after Noah finally fell asleep, I sat on the floor beside the bed with my laptop balanced on my knees and opened every account I still had access to. Bank statements, shared credit cards, email receipts, cloud photos, home camera history. At first, my hand shook so badly, I could barely type. Then the fear turned into focus. I found a hotel charge from a weekend Daniel told me he had been visiting his brother. I found dinner receipts for 2 from restaurants I had never been to. I found a jewelry purchase from 3 weeks before Noah was born, not charged to me, not gifted to me, but delivered to Claire's apartment. And then I found something worse. Large transfers from our joint savings account into a separate account with a name I recognized too well. Claire Montgomery, my best friend, my maid of honor. The woman who had stood beside me while I promised forever had been taking pieces of my future before I even knew it was being stolen. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Then I printed everything at the motel office the next morning while Noah slept against my chest in his carrier. The clerk looked at the stack of papers and asked if I needed a folder. I almost laughed. I needed a lawyer, a miracle, and maybe 1 full night of sleep. But I took the folder. That afternoon, I called an attorney whose number I had saved months earlier for a friend and never thought I would need for myself. I told her everything: the affair, the recordings, the threats, the custody trap, the money. For the first time in weeks, someone listened without interrupting me, without calling me emotional, without asking if I was sure. When I finished, she said, "Do not confront them yet." I looked down at Noah, sleeping with his little hand wrapped around my finger, and whispered, I wasn't planning to, because by then, I no longer wanted a fight in the kitchen. I no longer wanted Daniel to admit he hurt me. I no longer wanted Claire to cry and say she was sorry. I wanted the truth documented, organized, undeniable, and impossible to twist. So I kept playing the role they had written for me: broken wife, exhausted mother, woman with no power. And while they celebrated how easily they had pushed me out, I built the case that would bring them down. The more I looked, the more I realized Daniel and Claire had not been careful. They had been confident. There is a difference. Careful people hide things because they know they can be caught. Confident people leave traces everywhere because they believe the person they are hurting is too weak to follow them. Daniel had spent weeks calling me unstable, exhausted, emotional, and paranoid, and somewhere along the way, he started believing his own lie. Claire believed it too. That was why she kept texting me from inside my own house, sending messages that sounded sweet on the surface, but were really warnings dressed up as concern. Daniel says Noah slept better when he visited today. Maybe routine is what he needs. Screenshot. I don't want to overstep, but the nursery feels calmer now. Screenshot. You should think about what's best for him, even if it hurts. Screenshot. Every message was another little piece of her plan.
She wanted me to snap.
She wanted me to send back something angry, something desperate, something she could show Daniel's attorney and say, "See, this is what we're dealing with." So I gave her nothing. I answered with calm sentences that made me sick to write. Thank you for your concern. I'm focusing on Noah. Please direct custody-related conversations through Daniel. Meanwhile, my attorney helped me understand what mattered. Not feelings. Patterns. Not accusations.
Proof. So I made timelines.
I matched hotel receipts with dates Daniel said he was working late. I matched bank transfers with Claire's sudden new purchases. I saved home camera clips Daniel forgot still synced to my phone. One clip showed Claire taking Noah from his crib while he cried and then handing him to Daniel after only a few seconds because she was too tired. The same woman who told everyone she was the only one patient enough to care for him. Another clip showed Daniel rehearsing what he wanted to say about me before a call with his mother. Say she screamed. Claire told him. Say she scared the baby. Daniel asked, what if she denies it? Claire laughed and said, she's postpartum. Who do you think they'll believe? I watched that clip 3 times without blinking. Not because I needed to hear it again, but because something inside me needed to understand exactly who they were. Then came the evidence I never expected. I went back to the house one afternoon with Daniel's permission to pick up more of Noah's things. Claire was not supposed to be there, but when I walked in, I saw her perfume on the entry table and her shoes beside the door. She had started leaving pieces of herself everywhere, like she was marking territory. I said nothing. I packed diapers, blankets, medical records, and the baby monitor from the nursery. Then, before I left, I saw my wedding memory box pushed into the back of the hall closet, half open, like someone had gone through it. My veil was inside, folded badly, not the way I had kept it. Under it was the old program from the reception, a few dried flowers, and Claire's maid of honor speech. I almost left it there. I thought I already knew what that speech was. But when I picked it up, a smaller folded page slipped out from behind it. It was written in Claire's handwriting, not the polished handwriting from the speech cards. Messier. Angrier. The first line said, I should have been the bride. I sat back on my heels in the closet and felt the air leave my body. The note was not long, but it said enough. She wrote that Daniel looked at me the way he should have looked at her. She wrote that I always got chosen first. She wrote that standing beside me felt like punishment. And at the bottom, in a line pressed so hard into the paper it had nearly torn, she had written, one day he'll see I was the better woman. For years, I had wondered when my best friend became my enemy. That page answered me. She had not become my enemy after Noah was born. She had not become my enemy when Daniel grew distant. She had stood beside me on my wedding day, already wanting my life. I folded the note carefully and placed it into my folder with the receipts, screenshots, transfers, and recordings. Then I took one last look at my wedding veil before closing the box. Claire had held that veil like she was blessing me. Now the same veil had hidden the proof that she had hated me all along. When I left the house, Daniel texted, did you get everything you needed? I looked at Noah's bag, the baby monitor, the printed records, and the note in my purse. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. Then I typed back, yes, I got exactly what I needed. I thought the affair was the ugliest part of what they had done to me. I was wrong. Betrayal hurts your heart, but money shows you the plan. Once my attorney saw the bank transfers to Claire, she told me to stop thinking like a wife and start thinking like someone who had been targeted. That word stayed with me. Targeted. It made everything feel colder, but clearer. Daniel had not simply fallen out of love and made a selfish mistake. Claire had not simply become too close during a hard season. They had been moving pieces around long before they pushed me out of the house. So I went deeper. I checked old statements, credit card records, insurance documents, car payments, tax emails, anything I could still access before Daniel remembered to lock me out. At first, the transfers looked random. 3,000 here, 8,000 there, a payment labeled consulting, another labeled personal loan. But then I noticed the timing. The first large transfer happened 2 weeks after Noah was born, right around the time Daniel started saying I was not myself. Another happened the week Claire began telling his mother she was worried about the baby. Another happened 3 days before Daniel told me he had spoken to an attorney. It was not random. It was preparation. Daniel was draining our shared future while Claire helped him build a story that would leave me with nothing. Then I found the car. Daniel had told me for months that his company was providing him a temporary vehicle. But buried in an email thread was a purchase agreement for a black SUV registered under Claire's name, paid almost entirely with money from our joint savings. I stared at the document and remembered Claire pulling into my driveway in that same SUV, stepping out with groceries and saying, "Daniel helped me find a great deal." Daniel helped her. With my money. With our son's security. With the savings I thought we were building for a safer life. After that, the pattern opened like a wound. A storage unit under Claire's name. Jewelry purchases. Hotel charges. A down payment on an apartment Daniel claimed was for business use. My attorney explained that if Daniel was hiding marital assets before divorce, and if Claire was receiving them while participating in his custody claims against me, this was no longer just a moral betrayal. It was evidence of concealment, manipulation, and financial misconduct. For the first time, I felt the ground shift under them instead of under me. I was not just the crying wife in a motel anymore. I was the woman holding the paper trail. The most satisfying proof came from Claire herself. She posted a photo online standing in front of that black SUV, wearing sunglasses I recognized from a credit card statement, with the caption, "New season, new blessings." I saved it before she deleted it. New blessings. That was what she called the money stolen from a mother and her baby. I wanted to hate her loudly. I wanted to send the photo to everyone and write, "This is who she really is." But my attorney's voice stayed in my head.
Not yet.
Let them feel safe. So I stayed quiet. I let Daniel keep texting me threats. I let Claire keep pretending she was concerned. I let his family keep believing I was too broken to fight back. Meanwhile, my folder got thicker. Bank records. Transfer dates. Purchase agreements. Screenshots. Receipts.
Camera clips.
The note for my wedding box. Every lie had a date now. Every betrayal had a number beside it. And once the money trail was complete, I understood exactly why Daniel wanted me gone so badly. He was not only afraid I would expose the affair. He was afraid I would discover that while I was nursing his child, he and my best friend were already trying to steal the life I had helped build. Daniel and Claire planned their engagement party for a Saturday evening, less than 2 months after he threw me out of my own home. They did not call it an engagement party at first. Daniel told his family it was just a small dinner to celebrate a new beginning, but Claire made sure everyone understood what that meant. She posted photos of white flowers on her kitchen counter. She sent messages about wearing something elegant. She even texted me, pretending to be kind, saying Daniel wanted Noah there so his family could see him. "It might be good for everyone to feel normal again," she wrote. Normal, as if stealing my husband, pushing me into a motel, and trying to take my baby was just a messy little misunderstanding we all needed to heal from. I stared at that message for a long time before I answered. "I'll bring him for a short visit." The truth was, I had been waiting for them to give me exactly this. A room full of witnesses. Daniel's family. Claire's parents. The people who had believed I was unstable, bitter, and dangerous. The people who had watched another woman step into my house and called it kindness. My attorney did not love the idea at first, but when I showed her the guest list, the timing, and the messages Daniel had sent demanding Noah's presence, she leaned back in her chair and said, "If you go, you do not go alone." So I didn't. I arrived that evening with Noah in his carrier, wearing a simple black dress, my hair pulled back, my face calm enough that even I almost believed it. My attorney arrived separately and waited outside until I texted her. Through the front window, I could see Claire moving around the living room in a white dress. Not ivory. Not cream.
White.
She was laughing with Daniel's mother, touching the table settings, adjusting flowers, wearing the delicate gold bracelet Daniel had bought with money from our joint account. For 1 second, standing on that porch, I felt the old pain rise up so sharply I almost turned around. That had been my living room. Those had been my walls. That was my son's father standing beside my best friend while she smiled like a bride. Then Noah made a tiny sound in his carrier, and the pain hardened into purpose. When I stepped inside, the room went quiet in that fake polite way people go quiet when they have already discussed you before you arrived. Daniel looked surprised that I was not crying. Claire looked disappointed. She came toward me with her arms open, performing softness for the room. "I'm so glad you came," she said. Then she reached for Noah. I moved the carrier behind me and smiled. Not yet. Her face tightened, but only for a second. Daniel stepped in, lowering his voice. Don't start anything. I looked at him, then at the white flowers, the champagne glasses, the framed photo of him and Claire already sitting on the mantel where our wedding photo used to be. I'm not here to start anything, I said. I'm here to finish it. Before he could answer, I texted my attorney. 30 seconds later, the doorbell rang. When Daniel opened the door and saw her standing there with a leather folder in her hand, his face changed for the first time. Not anger, not arrogance.
Fear.
Claire tried to laugh it off. Is this really necessary? She asked, turning toward the guests like I was embarrassing myself. I looked at everyone in that room. Every person who had believed their whispers, every person who had treated my exhaustion like guilt, and placed my own folder on the coffee table. Before you celebrate stealing my family, I said, maybe everyone should see how you did it. Daniel reached for my arm, but my attorney stepped between us. Claire's mother gasped. Daniel's mother whispered his name. And for the first time since this nightmare began, no one was looking at me like I was unstable. They were looking at Daniel and Claire, waiting for them to explain why the woman they had thrown away had walked back in with proof. For a few seconds, nobody moved. The room that had been full of soft music, champagne glasses, and fake smiles went completely still. Daniel stared at the folder on the coffee table like it might disappear if he refused to touch it. Claire stood beside the fireplace in her white dress, one hand resting lightly on her stomach, performing innocence even then. This is insane, Daniel said finally, but his voice cracked in the middle. That crack told me everything. My attorney opened the folder and placed the first page on the table. Hotel receipts.
Dates. Times.
Charges made on the credit card Daniel told me he only used for work emergencies. I watched his mother lean forward, her face tightening as she recognized the weekends he had claimed to be visiting family. Then came the screenshots. Messages from Claire to Daniel before Noah was born. Messages about how tired I looked. Messages about how easy it would be to make people worry about me. Messages where Claire wrote, if she breaks down in front of everyone, they'll finally see what you've been dealing with. Claire's father said her name once, very quietly, like he was asking her to prove it wasn't real. She didn't answer. My attorney played the first audio clip next. Claire's voice filled the room, sweet and poisonous. Say she screamed. Say she scared the baby. Then Daniel's voice. What if she denies it? And Claire laughing as she said, she's postpartum. Who do you think they'll believe? Daniel's sister covered her mouth. His mother looked at him like she had never seen him before. Claire tried to step forward, saying, that was taken out of context. But I was ready for that too. I opened the next video on my phone and turned the screen toward the room. It was the nursery camera. Claire standing over Noah's crib while he cried, checking herself in the mirror, then walking away and shutting the door while my baby kept screaming. The same woman who told everyone I was too unstable to care for him. The same woman who called herself his bonus mommy.
The room shifted then.
I felt it. The pity they had aimed at Claire began to rot into disgust. But I was not finished. My attorney laid out the bank transfers next. Our joint savings moved into Claire's account. The black SUV, the jewelry, the apartment deposit, the so-called consulting payments. Every number was printed, highlighted, dated, and connected. Daniel, his mother whispered, tell me this is not true. He looked at Claire first. That was his second mistake. Everyone saw it. Everyone saw that before he thought about his son, before he thought about his wife, before he thought about the mother he had lied to, he looked at the woman who had helped him do it. Claire's face was no longer soft. It was sharp, cornered, ugly in a way makeup could not hide. You don't understand what she's like, she said, pointing at me. She was falling apart. I was the one holding everything together. I reached into my bag and took out the last page. The folded note from my wedding box. The room was so quiet I could hear the paper open. I read the first line out loud. I should have been the bride. Claire went white. Her mother stood up. I kept reading. Not all of it. Just enough. Enough for everyone to hear that this had not started with concern, or friendship, or love. It had started with envy. It had started with a woman standing beside me on my wedding day, already believing my life should have belonged to her. When I finished, I placed the note on top of the pile and looked directly at Claire. "You didn't take care of my family," I said. "You studied it. You copied it. Then you tried to steal it." Daniel reached for my folder then, desperate and stupid, but my attorney stopped him with one sentence. "Touch that evidence, and we add it to the report." He froze. And that was the moment I knew it was over.
Not legally yet.
Not officially. But in that room, in front of every person they had manipulated, Daniel and Claire lost the story they had built. I was no longer the unstable wife. I was no longer the broken mother. I was the woman they tried to erase, standing in the middle of their celebration, holding every truth they forgot to hide. The fallout did not happen all at once, but once it started, Daniel and Claire could not stop it. By the next morning, Daniel's family was no longer calling me unstable. They were calling him. His mother left me a voicemail, crying, apologizing for believing the wrong person, but I did not call her back. I had spent weeks begging to be heard. Now that the truth was finally loud enough, I needed silence more than apologies. My attorney filed everything: the custody threats, the recordings, the nursery footage, the bank transfers, the hidden purchases, the messages, and Claire's note from my wedding box. Daniel tried to say I misunderstood. Then he said Claire pressured him. Then he said he was only protecting Noah. But the evidence did not show a worried father. It showed a husband creating a crisis, so he could use it against his wife. The hearing lasted less than an hour, but it was the first time I felt the room turn in my direction. Daniel sat across from me in a dark suit, trying to look like a concerned parent. Claire sat behind him, dressed modestly, hands folded, wearing the same wounded expression she had used on everyone else. But this time, there was no living room audience for her to charm. Just a judge, attorneys, and proof. When Daniel's lawyer suggested I had been emotionally unstable after giving birth, my attorney played the audio. Claire's voice filled the room. "Say she screamed. Say she scared the baby." Then Daniel's voice followed. "What if she denies it?" The room went silent.
Claire stopped crying.
Daniel stared down at the table. Then came the nursery footage, the custody threats, and the bank transfers. Page after page. Date after date. Lie after lie. The judge looked directly at Daniel and said, "This court is deeply concerned by the pattern of manipulation presented here." I did not smile. I did not need to. I just held Noah's blanket in my lap and listened as Daniel's request for temporary custody was denied, his communication was restricted, and the financial records were ordered preserved for review. The SUV Claire loved became evidence. The jewelry became evidence. The apartment deposit became evidence. The money they thought would help them start a new life became the paper trail that exposed them. And once consequences arrived, their perfect love story cracked almost instantly. Daniel blamed Claire for the transfers. Claire blamed Daniel for lying about the money. When Claire reached for his arm, Daniel pulled away and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Don't touch me. You made this worse." Claire looked at him like the floor had disappeared beneath her. Then she whispered, "You said we were doing this together." And that was when I understood. They had never loved each other. They had only loved what they thought they could steal from me. I watched them turn on each other with the same cruelty they once used against me. And for the first time in months, I knew the truth was no longer trapped inside my chest. Daniel lost the family he betrayed. Claire lost the mask she had spent years perfecting. And I won back the one thing they had no right to touch: my future with my son. The first night in my new apartment, Noah slept better than I did. The place was small, smaller than the home Daniel had pushed me out of, but it was quiet in a way that felt holy. No footsteps in the hallway that made my stomach tighten. No whispered conversations behind closed doors. No woman standing in my kitchen pretending concern while measuring the corners of my life. Just a second-hand crib by the window, 2 suitcases still half unpacked, a lamp on the floor because I had not bought a table yet, and my son breathing softly beneath a blue blanket. I sat beside him for a long time, watching the streetlights move across the wall, and waited for sadness to swallow me. It didn't. There was grief, yes. There was anger. There were moments when I looked at my bare living room and thought about the house I had painted, cleaned, decorated, and imagined growing old in. But beneath all of that, there was peace. Real peace. The kind I had not felt in months. The legal fight continued for a while, because men like Daniel rarely lose quietly. He tried apologies. He tried anger. He tried sending messages through relatives about how we should think about Noah and not let bitterness win. But bitterness was never what guided me. Clarity did. My attorney handled the rest. The custody arrangement protected Noah. The hidden money was pulled back into the divorce case. The house was eventually sold, not because Daniel wanted to, but because the truth had made it impossible for him to keep pretending he was the victim. I did not cry when I signed the papers. I thought I would. I thought selling that house would feel like losing the last piece of the life I once wanted. Instead, it felt like opening a locked door. Claire disappeared from my world before Daniel did. I heard pieces of her story from other people because women like Claire always leave echoes behind. She moved out of the apartment Daniel had helped pay for. The SUV was taken back into the financial dispute. Her friends stopped inviting her to things. Her parents stopped posting pictures with her. And Daniel, the man she had spent years wanting, did exactly what selfish men do when consequences arrive. He blamed her. She blamed him. Their love story ended in attorneys' offices and angry messages, which felt almost poetic, considering they had tried to build it out of mine. People asked me if I felt satisfied. Sometimes I said yes because it was easier. But the truth is, revenge was not the best part. The best part was waking up one morning and realizing I was not waiting for anyone to choose me anymore. Not Daniel, not Claire, not his family, not the version of myself who thought being loved meant being safe. I chose myself every day after that.
I chose Noah.
I chose peace over performance, truth over appearances, and a small, honest life over a beautiful lie. Months later, on Noah's first birthday, I took out my wedding box one last time. The veil was still there, folded carefully now, no longer smelling like flowers or perfume or betrayal. For a moment, I thought about throwing it away. Then I placed it back in the box beside a new photo, me holding Noah in our apartment, both of us smiling, sunlight pouring through the window behind us. I kept the veil not because I missed the marriage, but because I wanted to remember the woman who wore it. She was trusting. She was hopeful. She did not know what was coming. And I refused to be ashamed of her. She loved honestly. That was never her weakness. The weakness belonged to the people who mistook her love for blindness. One day, when Noah is old enough, I will not tell him every ugly detail. I will not teach him to hate his father. But I will teach him this. Love is not control. Kindness is not weakness. And no one, no matter how close they stand beside you, has the right to steal the life you built. Claire stood beside me when I became a wife. But she forgot one thing. I became unstoppable when I became a mother.